Well, welcome everyone as the attendees are filtering in. Perfect timing, of course. I had this start right when the tornado siren practice is going on here in Sioux Falls, so hopefully that's not coming through too bad on the microphones. But my name is Andrew Reinertz. I'm the Community Development Director with Art South Dakota, and we're just really thrilled for the conversation we're going to have today to have these artists and longtime arts advocates in the state together for a conversation is really exciting. So first and foremost, I need to say a quick thank you to some of our partners who make this possible. The webinar series and all of our professional development work is funded through the South Dakota Arts Council, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Bush Foundation. And then before we get into the conversation, also just wanted to let everyone know about our next session coming up later this month. We're excited to be collaborating with the Watering Can, which is an artist support organization based in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. They're doing a long series using the Springboard for the Arts workbook for the business of art. And we'll be working with them on one that is pricing your art. So for visual artists and other three-dimensional pieces, folks that when you're the first time you're trying to kind of figure out how to really price your art and find a formula that works well for you, we'll be working with them on that. And then also just wanted to let you know that during the course of the conversation today, there'll be a lot of time for Q&A. So please submit your questions at any time and I'll bring them forth to the panelists. The easiest way is to use the Q&A button in the Zoom window, and that helps us track all those questions. And then let us know in the chat if you have any technical issues or if you have any other conversation you want to have with each other. And before we get started, I just wanted to quick say welcome to Jim Spears, the Executive Director from Art South Dakota, to say hello to everybody.
Hey, thank you, Andrew. Hello and good morning to everyone. Thanks for everyone attending our webinar today on this Friday, the 1st of November. It's hard to believe. This fall is going by quickly. So I just wanted to thank quickly our staff here, especially Andrew, for his work on these webinars. He does an excellent job on this program, and we're so thankful for his work. But also Sherry, who's out in the West, Sherry Cosell, Sarah Larson, and Amanda Levesque. Our entire team at Art South Dakota works to help prepare these and promote them and plan for these webinars. So thank you to the team. And I've been saying this a lot, and I just keep wanting to reinforce or to reference it, that service is our mission here at Art South Dakota. We are a service organization. We're here to serve you as artists and arts leaders. And that's why I'm so excited about these webinars. We've really embraced these over the last few years. They were kind of a COVID forced our hand, I guess you could say, when we weren't able to do programming publicly or in person, I should say. But we started doing webinars during COVID, and they've just become an essential part of our programs in our professional development. It's a great way for us to get together, for us to reach across such a geographically spread out state. It's always better to be in person when we can, but that's almost impossible here in South Dakota. So the webinars allow us to stay connected, to learn from each other, and I think most important to just stay in community, stay a part of the network. So thank you for being part of this this program with us. So today's webinar, I'm excited about because we have some wonderful people, some of our favorite people here joining us. Real champions for the arts across South Dakota and our native nations. And so I'm excited to hear what they have to say. South Dakota is known as a place for public art. I think public art puts us on the map in a lot of ways. And for generations, we've celebrated our cultures, our people through public art. And that continues today. And it's even growing. It's an ever expanding part of experiencing our state, and so I'm excited to celebrate that with you all and hear what the panelists have to say. So with that, I'm going to send it back to you, Andrew, and thank you so much.
Great, thanks, Jim. Yeah, and thank you so much to our panelists who will introduce very shortly here. I thought just to kind of set the stage for the conversation for those of you that haven't had a chance to see the documentary yet, Anna Marie provided the kind of 2 minute trailer for the film, so I thought we would quickly watch that. I'm making sure the sound is going to come through.
Imagine a small town that decides to infuse its walkways with art. It may start with a mural or two, colorful and vibrant, adorning the side of a building, or with one sculpture on the street or in a park. This art isn't just paint on walls or figures on a street corner or on the quad. They are stories etched into the environment. Each piece tells a tale, celebrating the community's history or its citizens, or reflecting diversity, culture, and aspirations. As art graces the public spaces, people begin to notice and appreciate their surroundings and engage differently with them. What were once ignored walls or spaces become destinations, where locals and visitors alike stop to view, and then stroll the streets to engage with the art that breathes life into the community. The story of public art in a community is one of transformation. It's about turning mundane spaces into vibrant canvases that celebrate diversity, history, and creativity. It's about fostering a sense of pride, belonging, and unity among the people. Public art has the power to breathe life into a community, making it not just a place to live, but a place to thrive, connect, and be inspired.
Great. Well, with that, I'd like to welcome our panel. We have Anna Marie Thatcher, the producer of the film and longtime advocate for many things and longtime art supporter throughout the state, doing multiple things over the years. We also are very lucky to have with us two artist laureates. We have Marty Two Bulls Jr., the Oglala Lakota Sioux Tribe Artist Laureate, as well as Dale Lamphere, the South Dakota Artist Laureate, both of whom were also featured in the documentary. Well, first to start, Anna Marie, I wanted to just kind of ask you, as we set the stage for this conversation about public art and its impact, why this documentary now? What really spurred you to want to kind of tell some of these stories in one place? And alongside that, as you were working on that, and through that process, what kind of surprised you? Was there anything that really jumped out at you that was unanticipated?
Well, it started really when I was part of a committee at Dakota Wesleyan University, of which I am an alum, to commission a new piece of artwork for the new business school at Dakota Wesleyan. And we began in actually 2000, late 2020, of course, kind of in the midst of COVID, and we did a nationwide search for an artist to produce a sculpture. And as you'll see in the film, the piece called Power of Possibility is a blue translucent piece that was created by Joan Benefiel, who's in the documentary. And it was installed in September of 2022, and we thought, well, it would be nice to have some video to explain about the art, how it came about, the process, etc. And Joan and her partner, Jeremy, have a lot of video on their website about the creation of the piece. And I thought, this is a lot of stuff. And how does it affect the Dakota Wesleyan community? And I thought, I don't think we've ever done anything to talk about the impact of public art around the state. And of course, I had a gallery in Rapid City, Dakota Arts, in the mid '80s, and I've worked with Dale for decades, and recently met Marty. And I thought, let's expand this. Let's see what's out there. So I visited with Dakota Wesleyan University, Kitty Allen, who is the vice president for institutional advancement. And I said, let's look at this. And so we submitted a grant application to the to the South Dakota Humanities Committee, and also the South Dakota Area Community Foundation. And we were given funds to proceed with this. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, never having produced anything of this magnitude. But so that started it. So I enlisted Randall Iverson to do the filming, and we filmed around the state in September of 2023. And then we're in the editing process and producing process over the last year. So basically what it is it's an expansion of the idea of public art at Dakota Wesleyan University and the impact that it's had there. And to answer the question about surprises, I mean, I've known that there's a lot of art in South Dakota, having worked with artists for decades and been, around the state somewhat, but not to the extent that I was during that tour. And I found myself very, very surprised and delighted that we could find so many things in so many small towns. And we've always kind of focused on Rapid City and Sioux Falls, and we know that those have big art projects. But I was amazed by the support in smaller communities around the state for public art. And some small communities of like 3,400 people that support art to the tune of several $100,000 of privately funded projects. And so it was a surprise to me. And along with the South Dakota Humanities Council, we wanted it to be an educational piece for students, for our citizens to really take a look at the state, not just at the larger communities, but at some of the small ones that have supported artwork and created an interest all around the state and also on the reservations. And so we were delighted actually with the result. We worked with Erin Crawford, who's the young editor from Aberdeen, did a wonderful job of also contributing to the film and with her skills. And we're delighted with the project, and we hope that it does what we want it to do, and that is educate the public in South Dakota about the treasures that we have.
Yeah, it's something we found at Art South Dakota too, traveling the state is we know there's so much amazing work happening everywhere, but I'm still surprised at just how much amazing creative work is happening in every corner of the state, even though we're often so spread out.
Well, just one final comment. I, having worked with the arts in South Dakota for decades now, per capita, we have a lot of artists and musicians in this state, probably more than a lot of other states, even states that are highly populated.
Mhm.
And they're all over the state, and it's something of which I think we should be very proud.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Well, kind of setting that up, and also just so all the viewers know, you can watch the full documentary on the South Dakota Public Broadcasting Passport Program if you're a part of that. And then Anna Marie also very kindly sent a link out that we'll be able to provide to all of you so you can watch the full piece if you don't have the access to that public broadcasting project. But, I kind of wanted to start with you, Marty, next, of just during the documentary, when you were talking about the some of the projects at the Oyate Health Center, and you kind of mentioned how the goal was to be open to everyone, but that it really is intended for a particular community. This public art is for a particular community, and I'm just kind of curious how, as an artist, how you approach some of these public art projects where you're really trying to capture the essence of a community and serve a particular community. Do you approach that differently than you would approach some of your creative work otherwise that wasn't for a public process?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, audience is a big, considering my audience is a really big factor in the work that I do. I show work in a lot of different ways. I create artwork in a lot of different ways. I do exhibitions and far off places, and I do illustrations for magazines and news articles, and then also, public work as well. And yeah, I spend a lot of time thinking about who my audience is, who I'm in a way speaking to with the work that I'm creating. And particularly with the piece at Oyate Health Center, it was a great opportunity to really prioritize my indigenous community, my Lakota community, which isn't always the case with the work that I do. So yeah, really thinking about what was valuable to my community. That work at the hospital is a piece that sort of captures the history of that site. So we're going back to the Federal Indian Boarding School, through the tuberculosis clinic, into the Indian Health Services Hospital, Susan, to today, the new hospital, the Oyate Health Center. And I grew up in this community in Rapid City, and um, really drew on that to help sort of make the decisions that I made in terms of the images that I, put into that work, and really tried to capture some of that in the process.
As that's now been kind of installed and up for a little while, what are some of the impacts you've seen? Have you had any responses from people as they've been in the health center, and how it's kind of changed their interaction with the new building, and especially acknowledging the long kind of complex history of that space?
Yeah, so far, I mean, all of the feedback I've gotten is really positive. It's been really great to have people, when they realize that I made the work, come up and talk to me and thank me. And so far, everything's been really positive. But I think in general, the art collection at that hospital has made a big impact and will continue to in the future. When they created that hospital, they set aside a large budget to purchase original artworks from artists in our community in the Northern Plains, and there really isn't another collection like it. It's a massive contemporary art collection from a wide range of artists, mostly Lakota, but a lot of Northern Plains artists, and it belongs to our community. It's one of the few art collections that is not owned by a different organization or a museum. It really does belong to the community, and it's on display for the community. And I think I'm really grateful for the decisions that were made that led to this point. Every time I go in there, it just it feels, it's a great building, but the art really brings in a different component. It reflects the community back to itself. Gives us a place to sort of celebrate our culture and our contemporary lives.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit. There was when I used to work for a film production company, someone we worked with had a saying of that if the only stories you hear are told elsewhere, you think life is only lived elsewhere. And I think having some of those the contemporary art telling the contemporary stories in that space helps there to be that life is being lived there, and it's not a representation of something from a different time or a different place. It's an actively lived life now, for the community. Well, Dale, jumping over to you for just a little bit, you've done so many public art projects over the years, in South Dakota and elsewhere. But maybe I'd just be kind of curious with some of that historical experience. You are still a very young man. I'm not trying to say anything otherwise, but just with some of that
Totally.
long time experience, how have you seen some of these public art projects really evolve over the years that you've been involved with and have a long tail of an impact? or how have you seen some of the creative community change in response to some of that work over the years?
I think the first one that comes to mind, and I did it back in the 80s, was a work called The Spirit of Dakota, and it was for the city of Huron, South Dakota. They built a new convention center and hotel and wanted something to place out in front of it, and it was a settlement era woman in a windswept situation with her dress and bonnet off to the side, and at any rate, it was well received. And then the group of women got together and formed Spirit of Dakota committee, and for now 30 some years or more, they have given an award to a South Dakota woman who has made outstanding contributions to their community. And so it kind of expanded the life of that piece and its effect. And that event still goes on today. I created a oval plaque that had the image of the sculpture on it, and that's given as a gift every year to that person that wins the award. But it's remarkable. I mean, the accomplishments of the ladies that have received that award, and they get dozens of nominations every year. I think it happens in October, so it's just recently taken place. But that's one of the examples of the continuing effect of a work, and something that celebrate that.
Unknown caller.
Pardon me, I'll get this shut off here. Something that I think the best public art is work that celebrates something that's intrinsic to the culture, because as you said, then it lets people know that life is being lived here, not somewhere else. And so my efforts have largely centered around that, though I've done work all over the country, and I try to find out something about every community and location, and it becomes very site specific, just like you said, Marty. You try to speak to your audience to some degree, but through your own sense of design, vocabulary, and materials, and I sure think that piece, that major work that you did at the Oyate Center, I mean, it's like a journey through time, and then there are elements in it that reflect the people who are actually viewing it. So it brings it right up to today, which I think is an excellent passage that you've created there.
Thank you, Dale.
Well, this is a fairly broad question, I suppose, but for any of the panelists, is there ever any tension between celebrating something, celebrating that culture while also trying to speak to the culture and to changes you'd like to see? That's one thing I always find must be really difficult with public art, is that you're trying to speak to a very broad cross section of a particular community, but you're trying to, it's like in the trailer, I like how it was making your communities not just a place to live, but a place to thrive, connect, and be inspired. So, how do you try to bring in some of that inspirational side and, I don't know, for lack of a better term, confrontation in a positive sense, confronting someone with something you would like to see changed about the community, as well as celebrating the community as it is. How do either of you approach that in your work?
Marty, you want to go ahead?
Okay. So I mean, that's a difficult question to answer. I mean, some of that stuff is anticipatable. like, thinking about having somewhat of an objective and, kind of trying to anticipate where controversy might lie or where things might get tricky. But, in other ways, I guess it could come up sort of on its own. I don't have a whole lot of experience. I'm still kind of early in my career, especially with public work. But I mean, if like, I don't know, for instance, the Lakota Star Knowledge sculpture in Kyle, South Dakota at the Oglala Lakota Art Space that I collaborated on with three other artists, Keith Braveheart, Michaela Patton, and Laylee Long Soldier. That was a group sort of effort, kind of working on ideas related to Lakota Star Knowledge and creating a public work for the community there that so it was centered on Lakota Star Knowledge and was a teaching tool, but also, an aesthetic statement. And in that kind of work, our culture doesn't have like a standardized text or like an official even orthography. So whenever you're dealing with, culture, Lakota culture, even as a community member, it can be, controversial in how you represent things and how you talk about things. And, one way that we were kind of careful about our decisions when we were meeting and doing our planning sessions was making sure to consult, community members, especially elders and culture bearers, and, get feedback from, lots of different folks. And, thankfully, the projects that I've been a part of haven't really had a lot of negative pushback from the community. But, I'm always careful of thinking about the work from different angles. I think it's different when it's in a public setting, especially a place where people don't really get to opt in or out of experiencing the work. Whereas if I do a work for a gallery, you have to go to that gallery and you have to kind of, you're in a way opting into the experience. But a work that's in a hospital or that's in a courtyard, folks are going to experience that whether they, really care to or not. So I try to think about it from, I think, even more angles than I do in the work that I show in galleries or spaces like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I resonate a little bit with that as a musician, where I feel like sometimes, visual art, you can close your eyes, but it's very hard to stop your ears completely if someone is around your music. And so it's kind of something I try to take to heart of if someone is nearby, they're going to be experiencing it. And that's a very different approach with public art than, like you said, with a gallery space. Well, for either of you, but maybe, oh, Dale, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to the question at least as I can recall it. But for me, I always try to have as many layers of meaning as possible in the work, and I try to be inspirational in some way or convey some specific message. And I mean, one example of it are the four works that are in the Capitol Rotunda. I mean, it's aspirational, but I like to think that our legislators possess some of those qualities of vision, courage, integrity, and whatever the other one is, wisdom. There we go. And then for like the Arc of Dreams, it's describing. I mean, it's a big architectural form, but it's also describing the journey that we all take, and we have an idea that originates somewhere in our consciousness. And we can take it a certain distance, but at some point we always have to take that leap of faith in order to complete the dream. And this is something that is everyone's experience, and I've tried to describe it visually. And I know that schools there in Sioux Falls have used that as an inspirational tool for their students. They put something up on a board, and they can pin their dreams along the way there to kind of show and think about that fact that they have to trust themselves at some point and believe in that they can do these things in order to accomplish them. So those sort of inspirational aspects certainly come about. And then in terms of controversy, well, you know, that's something I try to be as inclusive as I can with the group that I'm working with, because I found that you only run into trouble when you don't pay attention to all the input that's coming in from about a particular piece, and that's been very much my approach over the years.
One of the comments I would make too, and Marty addresses this in the interview that we had with him in the film, and that is that we don't see enough native art. We don't see enough art in the state by our native artists, and I'm not sure exactly where that needs to start. Local organizations. Businesses, but experiencing that collection at the Oyate Health Center was overwhelming to me. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic, and it's a shame that it's isolated in a way to a specific space, and I know that we've had exhibits of art by Native artists in galleries and art centers, etc. But I think South Dakota really needs to make a concerted effort to include more art that represents our native brothers and sisters. It's a shame to ignore all of that talent that exists, and the Oyate collection is a magnificent representation of what we're missing, actually.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, it's another important part of that is having, as much as possible, the curation of work like that come from within the community. I think a lot of times outsiders sort of curate our culture and our work in public settings like that. And I think the more you can include, curators and academics from, within our community, the better that work's going to be. Not just artists, but also, the other end of that.
Yeah, that's something that I'm always, as a musician, kind of, and not a visual artist, the context in which visual art is presented adjusts so much about it. And so even if the work is in and of itself a certain thing, the context of the pieces around it, or how it's presented at a gallery, or as you said, Marty, how it's curated by another perspective, can really change how the conversation goes in an interesting way, for good or ill. But it definitely provides a much a different part of the conversation there.
Another thing that I hope the film does is to expand the definition of public art. I mean, many times when I said we're doing a documentary on public art, people would say, oh, sculptures. Well, no. No, I mean, there's a broad range of things. And Jeff Viken talks about this, about including Native art in his environment as a federal judge, and how important that is. And I agree with Marty about, including curators that will bring that to the forefront to say, no, this can also be public art, whatever form that is, whether it's beadwork, whether it's glass work, it doesn't matter. But to expand the definition of public art to whatever is accessible and visible to the public, and having it available to speak about the community and to the community and through the community, but to expand what we know as what we traditionally think of as public art.
Yeah, I would really agree with that. I mean, I in my mind expand it to architecture as well. I mean, anything that's a real direct interface with the public, and has artistic value to it, could be considered in that same realm.
And Marty, that makes me think just a little bit of the winter count project that you and Keith are working on, and how that's kind of another. I mean, that's very much a public thing and a very important cultural thing. How have you found that project going so far?
Good. You know, it's been a learning experience in a lot of ways. You know, this project is a little and also very intimidating. It's a work commissioned by the tribe, you know. It's a unique commission, and crosses both sort of like more traditional Western European ideas around art and also traditional, you know, ideas around creativity and what our art and our traditions look like. So yeah, it's been good. It's been a lot of preparing, you know, preparing the hide. We harvested a buffalo this spring and brain tanning the hide, and you know, trying to follow as much of the traditional practices as we can, you know, building up to the final creation. And it's a work that I know really feel like I don't feel like I don't want to take like traditional authorship like maybe the way I would with a painting or, you know, to another 2D work exactly. So I'm trying to bring in as much of the community as possible and preparing some community sessions of, you know, around like, well, you know, the winter count is both an aesthetic object but also a tool for recording the history and, you know, retelling the history. So thinking about what to include and how to engage with imagery. You know, I'm a contemporary artist, and I definitely am inspired and draw inspiration from, you know, traditional artists and iconography. But like, you know, culture changes. You know, how does the imagery change? How does the storytelling change? And I don't feel qualified, or not, maybe not qualified is the right word, but I don't feel like it should be an individual that makes that decision alone. Should be a community effort.
That's really exciting. I'm really excited to hear as that project continues to progress. Speaking to a little bit of that, you know, we've all talked just a little bit about consulting the community and learning about the community that you're doing the piece of work for, whether it's your own community or a different community. You know, Anna Marie, this is a little bit of a question for you, seeing it from the other side, as you brought in a non-South Dakota artist to do the work at Dakota Wesleyan. You know, how did you ensure that the community was and the spirit of what the Dakota Wesleyan was looking to achieve? You know, how did you find that process went, and what did you do to kind of ensure that the artist had heard the full slate of voices you were trying to kind of have represented?
Well, first of all, we did a national search, and we had 38 proposals come in from around the country, and we only had one from South Dakota, unfortunately, even though we distributed that to all the arts organizations in the state. So we were a bit disappointed in that, but the person and the proposal that we chose was what we felt would best represent what we wanted. And we've included in the film Joan's discussion about that process and the proposal, the ideas. We were very specific about what we wanted not in terms of form or finished product, but in terms of the idea that we wanted represented. So, and she said to us that we were a bit more specific than a lot of other projects that she's seen. And so it's a very interesting part of the film, I think, as to how she went about this commission and worked with us. She was just a gem to work with. I mean, we were back and forth a lot. And for instance, we started out with that piece. We wanted it to be Dakota Wesleyan blue. So that was one of the specifics. And the original proposal had basically slab pedestals in it. And as we got into it and we looked at the finished building, because the building wasn't entirely completed when we started this. And as we looked through it, she looked at it and she said, you know, stainless steel would really look better, because we looked at the building and the steel, the stainless elements of the building. And so it was back and forth. And so we went back to the drawing board and said, well, yeah, can we raise enough money to add, because it was an extra expense. And she worked with us, and what we ended up with was really exactly what we wanted. And Kitty Allen and President Dan Kittle do speak to that at the end of the film in terms of what they feel that it represents in terms of the values of Dakota Wesleyan and in terms of what we wanted the sculpture to represent.
Yeah. That brings to mind
I
an
think
interesting. Go ahead, Dale.
I just think that the sculpture's really successful. I was involved in looking at the proposals and you know, because it is a university and because it's a program that is developing the capacity for the people who go through it, and the work itself has that sort of slightly formed but not completely formed. It's more suggestive than descriptive, and I think that's just an excellent piece for what's actually happening there at the university. I mean, it's in the process of being formed. And so I think a real good choice was made in that selection.
Following up to that, Dale, you know, you've been involved in so many projects from so many scopes of size and so many different types of organizations. You know, for communities or for organizations in South Dakota that are looking to do public art projects, what are some things you've found have been helpful to you as an artist to have included in the call for art? Is there, you know, do you like it when it's a little bit more specific? Do you like it when it's a little more open? You know, what kind of guidance might you have for folks who are curious to start soliciting calls for a public art project?
Well, to listen carefully is probably the most important thing. The best projects that are those that are the most inclusive, that you get input from everyone and you sort through that, and of course you elevate some and discount others in your own head. But you got to listen to what people are telling you, and I always try to take, even if what they come up with, what they're saying in the beginning sounds a little off, I'll generally raise my hand and then try to share with them a process of thinking that elevates it, that takes it to all that it can be, because I think it's the responsibility of the artist to always do something that's worthy of the opportunity that they've been given. You know, no matter what the client is saying, you know, you're the artist and you can always move it forward a little bit as long as you share with your clients how you're doing this and what your thinking is. And so that communication, just like Anna Marie said, that communication back and forth with whoever it is who's commissioning the work is so very important.
Yeah, great. That's really, really helpful for both from organizations to be open and willing to listen to the artists and what they're recommending, but then also for the artists to feel comfortable. It's always a little bit of a tight spot you're in, I think, when you're doing commissioned work, because it is a commission, but it is also your vision, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Well, you know,
Go ahead.
Well, okay. Just one thing that sort of is a way to encapsulate the thought is that I always think of it as though I've got a 5-gallon bucket of water, and that's my energy and ambition that I'm going to do something with. And if I just pour it out on the ground, well, it soaks in, it doesn't have much effect. But a commission, and the reason that I like them is that it's like you've cut a channel in the earth, and when you pour that 5-gallon bucket of water in there, it cuts deeper and travels further and has more effect because you've limited the parameters of what you're doing with it. And that's what a commission is for me. It lets me focus my energy on something specific, and that's why for me it's always so important to try to elevate it and make it what I believe is something that's worthy and worthwhile of doing. So that.
My question was going to be for Marty, because I know that funds were included in the building for the health center. Were there any parameters set for the building when the decision was made to do that? I mean, by the architects, or was there any other input? And how was it done, I guess, basically?
Well, some of that I don't have the answer to. So the way it was set up was through a committee, an art committee, and they kind of managed the call, they managed the submissions. I got involved almost 2 years ago during the construction when I was putting in my proposal for the work that eventually went up there, and some of the parameters involved, like I learned this because I've never put work in a hospital, but you can't put there's a lot of material restrictions when you put artwork in a hospital, like you can't have anything porous, so everything had to either be sealed behind something non-porous, or your materials had to be non-porous, so there was a lot of kind of material restrictions. But yeah, some of that I think would be better answered by their art commission.
Yeah, those material dilemmas are always quite interesting to me. Talking with some of the folks at the Sisseton Area Arts Council when they were doing the sculptural pieces for the roundabouts and the highway going through town. That was a really interesting challenge for a lot of the sculptors, because they had to be porous enough for the wind to go through, much like Dale, I know you had with the back of Dignity, with having to change the design there as the wind was whipping a little bit differently than anticipated. But then the one that really surprised me about the roundabouts was they also had to be a certain strength where they won't fall down, but if a vehicle does run into them, they're designed to be somewhat breakable so that it's not an immovable force that vehicle is running into. So I assume that must just be an interesting challenge for artists, for any work that is either outdoors or has other material restrictions like that.
Yeah, there's sightline restrictions on roundabout pieces as well. I did one in Snowmass a number of years ago, and that was a big consideration there. So everything had to be elevated. So when you're doing the roundabout, people can look across to some degree and see what's going on the other side. That doesn't seem to be a universal regulation, but some of them are very strict.
Well, this is a little bit again of a larger question, but to wrap up with kind of one of the final questions here, both Dale and Marty, you are both artist laureates, and that is, in a way, makes a little bit of everything that you do a piece of public art, because in some way, shape, or form, you've been kind of chosen as somewhat of a representative of a particular governmental body to be a representative through the arts. What have you found, Dale, having been an artist laureate for a little while, and then Marty being a relatively new artist laureate along with Keith Braveheart? Has there been any lessons learned there, or anything interesting you've found as you've been put into a little bit more of a public place broadly?
Well, it doesn't come with a retirement program or anything like that. But I feel a real responsibility to give back at this point. I mean, I've had a wonderful career and done things and had opportunities that I had never imagined. And I'm really grateful for that. And I mean, one of the things that I try to do is have welcome students whenever they want to come up. I mean, we've had a number of projects here over the years that have been really excellent opportunities for students to come and be involved in. And one recent one, I mean, the students have actually, I give them, they hear and this relates to the Remembering the Children project that Marty has worked on and with me on this, and been very encouraging. And I think of myself as a professional that has a certain capacity, but I want to pass that on as much as I possibly can. And students have come up here. We've had over 100 students at this point in the last several months, and they hear a story about the boarding school experience and the children that died attending, and then they're given a piece of clay, and they sculpt something that's a message to these children, and that's, they actually apply that then to the piece. And so the piece has over 60, 70 works that were done by students all the way from real early elementary on through high school. And those are cast now in bronze, and will be part of the piece forever. So it's, and along with that, I've had a couple of apprentices here, particularly one, and more recently that has helped with the work, and then gone ahead and sculpted their own piece that's now cast in bronze as well. And so those are the things. We've had the South Dakota Symphony Young Composers Group come here for several years in a row to spend the day, and you know, those sorts of things are just so important, because we all are, you know, I'm getting at the point where I'm looking at my own mortality here, and I want to do everything I can to encourage the future artists to step up and enjoy the creative process in their own life.
How about Marty, from kind of the other end of the career spectrum of a, you know, a new artist laureate? You know, I think both of you model all three of you really model what a creative life can be, and that's, I think, just even providing that model is so important, so that folks know that it's a possibility to do this. You know, none of us do this because it is the easy route, by any means. But how have you found that experience so far?
Well, you know, it was a real honor getting that recognition from the tribe. And you know, as Dale said, is a real responsibility. You know, for me, a lot of what I found myself doing, you know, this last year is really like volunteering a lot. You know, doing the best I can to be a positive force in the arts in my community, and however I can be helpful. I mean, it's in a lot of ways, as an artist, you know, my specialties aren't necessarily, you know, as vital as maybe a doctor or an engineer. And, you know, I've kind of found myself trying to find ways to be, you know, be helpful in my community. Sometimes it's serving on, you know, art committees like the Remembering the Children Art Committee, you know, helping those folks with their memorial, and, you know, helping them guide their art decisions and things like that. Or I don't know. I mean, it's, you know, I'm always looking for ways to, you know, to live up to that honor, and to really set a good example. And you know, I'm an educator as well, you know, teaching and, you know, working with young artists. As an artist, a lot of my success is due to the networks that I've created over the years, and people I know, the opportunities I've had. And, you know, I think what I'm realizing more and more is the importance of kind of expanding those networks, but also bringing people in. And, like, you know, I'm always looking for ways to do that, you know, especially, you know, first, in a lot of ways it happens with my students. You know, that hospital also has 2 murals from alumni from my program, my art program. You know, I'm always trying to find ways and bring those opportunities to other artists in my community. And not just thinking about my own career or my own career goals, but really thinking about the communities. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you all so. Oh, go ahead, Anna Marie.
One of the things I would say, and Alexa Sheldon in Aberdeen says it in the film, is that I hope the film will inspire young artists to show them that even though we're a relatively small populated state, that there are a lot of opportunities here. There's a lot of mentorship available through artists like Dale and Marty and many others. And I hope it will inspire younger artists in the state to pursue those dreams of being working artists and doing what they can in the state.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you all so much. I think that's the perfect note to end on. I want to say thank you so much to Anna Marie Thatcher, to Dale Lamphere, and to Marty Two Bulls Jr. for joining us today. We'll send the link to this recording out to everyone, as well as a link to the full documentary, so you can see the full inspirational set of projects that they cover. And I think it's a really effective documentary to tell the breadth of the types of public art and their impacts across the state. Just thank you all, everyone that was here today on the panel and viewing, for everything you do to support a creative South Dakota. You know, it takes a lot of people to keep creative communities expanding and moving forward, and we thank you all for the work that you're doing across the state. Also, please feel free to reach out to any of us at Art South Dakota if we can be of any service. As Jim Spears mentioned at the beginning, we really want to try to support artists and arts organizations as best we can. And if you have any ideas for future webinar sessions, we would love to hear them, and we'd love to help provide whatever information we can. So with that, we'll say thank you again, wishing you all a really wonderful weekend, and thank you to our three panelists for joining today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.